So often, American motorsport fans convince themselves that this, finally, is the driver who will bring the stars and stripes back to Formula One. This heart-stopping crash.
Put it in the wall. Big crash on board.
To this one.
This time on the inside, a continent touch.
Every F1 driver has faced their worst nightmare on track in some way or another. Let's take a look at the worst crashes from each one.
Most drivers spend their careers trying to avoid crashing. This one made it his signature. From ignoring safety rules, to wiping out rivals, to somehow winning a Formula One race in the middle of it all. Nothing about his career made sense, because in any normal world, he wouldn't have lasted 5 races, let alone 5 seasons. Pastor Maldonado didn't rise through the ranks the way most Formula One drivers do. There was no underdog story, no relentless climb built purely on talent. Instead, there was money. A lot of money. While other drivers were fighting for every seat, every sponsor, every opportunity, Pastor always seemed to have one waiting for him. And to be fair, he wasn't terrible. He had the occasional win, a few solid results, just enough to justify staying in the conversation, but never enough to actually dominate it. Yet somehow, no matter the mistakes, no matter the crashes, no matter how chaotic things got, he kept moving up, higher, faster, closer to Formula One. And that's when things started to get concerning, because while other drivers were learning control, Pastor was already proving he didn't have much of it. That reputation didn't take long to explode. Monaco, 2005, narrow streets, no runoff, no room for error. The kind of track where drivers are expected to show absolute control and absolute respect. During a practice session, a car lost control ahead. Yellow flags came out immediately. Marshals rushed onto the circuit. This is the moment every driver is trained for. Slow down, stay alert, protect the people on track. Every single driver did exactly that, except one. Pastor Maldonado. He didn't lift. Not enough. Not even close. He came flying through the section, straight into a live recovery zone. Cars, debris, marshals on foot, and then impact. Chaos. By pure luck, it wasn't fatal, but one marshal was left seriously injured, suffering multiple fractures and unable to move for months. In motorsport, that's not just a mistake, that's the line, the one you never cross. And Pastor didn't just cross it, he went straight through it at full speed. The response was instant, a race ban, and even more damning, a lifetime ban from Monaco. His career should have ended right there, because incidents like that don't get second chances. Not at this level, not on this track, but somehow it didn't end, because what happened next had nothing to do with talent, and everything to do with power. That lifetime ban should have been final. In motorsport, Monaco isn't just another race, it's sacred. Drivers have been punished for far less, and never allowed back, but Pastor Maldonado wasn't just another driver. Behind him was power, real power. Because Maldonado wasn't just backed by family money, he was backed by the Venezuelan government, and more specifically, Hugo Chavez, a leader with influence, resources, and a very specific interest in keeping Maldonado on the rise. What followed wasn't an appeal. It wasn't a second chance earned through merit. It was pressure, behind closed doors, money, influence. And suddenly, the lifetime ban didn't look so permanent anymore. It was overturned, just like that. The same driver who had crossed one of the sport's most dangerous lines was allowed to come back. And from that moment on, one thing became very clear. Pastor Maldonado wasn't playing by the same rules as everyone else, and that would follow him all the way to Formula One. Despite everything, Pastor kept climbing. And to his credit, the results started to show it. In GP2, the final step before Formula One, Maldonado suddenly looked like a completely different driver. Aggressive, fast, and for once, consistent enough to win. Race after race, he built momentum. Wins turned into streaks. Streaks turned into a championship. By the end of the season, he'd secured the GP2 title, one of the clearest signals that a driver is ready for Formula One. On paper, this was everything he needed. But even then, something didn't quite add up. Because while the results looked dominant, the doubts never really disappeared. The mistakes were still there, the unpredictability, the moments where control just vanished. And in Formula One, those moments don't cost you positions, they end careers. For most drivers, that would have been the barrier. A reminder that winning in GP2 doesn't automatically translate to surviving in F1. But Pastor Maldonado wasn't relying on translation. He had something else, because while other champions were waiting for a call, Maldonado arrived with backing that teams couldn't ignore. Millions in sponsorship, funded by Venezuela's state oil company, and supported by a government that wanted him on the grid. No matter what, and just like that, the final barrier disappeared. Formula One wasn't out of reach anymore. It was inevitable. And in 2011, it finally happened. Pastor Maldonado became a Formula One driver, signed by Williams' F1 team, a team with championship history. Now clinging to relevance, they needed performance, but what they really needed was money. And Maldonado arrived with a lot of it. Backed by millions, he wasn't just a rookie, he was a business decision, which meant one thing: ready or not, he was getting that seat. And it didn't take long to see how this was going to go. The speed? Surprisingly decent. The rest of it? Not so much. Because Formula One isn't just about being fast in a straight line, it's about control, precision, awareness, all the things that stop you from driving into other people, or walls, or occasionally nothing at all. Race after race, the same pattern kept repeating. A decent start, a moment of promise, and then something went wrong. Sometimes it was a spin, sometimes a collision, sometimes a penalty for doing something that really shouldn't need explaining. And every time it happened, you started to realize something. This wasn't bad luck. This was who he was as a driver. By the end of his rookie season, the numbers told the story. Incidents in more than half the races, just a single point finish, and a growing reputation that followed him into every weekend. Because in Formula One, consistency earns respect, control earns results, and Pastor Maldonado was building a reputation for having neither. And then, somehow, everything changed. Spanish Grand Prix, a normal race weekend, until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, Pastor Maldonado put his car on pole position, ahead of drivers who were faster, more consistent, and far more trusted. It didn't make sense. It wasn't supposed to happen. And yet, there he was, starting from the front. Now normally this is where the story falls apart. A poor launch, a mistake into turn one, or a crash before the first lap is even over, because that's what Pastor Maldonado does. But this time, he didn't. He got off the line clean, settled into the race, and for the first time in his career, everything looked controlled. Behind him, the pressure started building. Faster cars, better teams, drivers who knew exactly how to win races, and at the center of it all, Fernando Alonso, relentless, patient, waiting for the mistake that always comes. Lap after lap, he stayed within reach, close enough to attack, close enough to punish even the smallest error. And that's the thing. With Maldonado, the mistake always comes. The late brake, the snap of oversteer, the moment where control just disappears. Everyone watching was waiting for it. Lap 10, nothing. Lap 20, still nothing. Pit stops came and went, strategies played out, and somehow he was still leading, not surviving, leading, matching the pace, hitting his marks, driving like a completely different person. As the laps ticked down, the pressure didn't fade, it intensified, because now it wasn't just about holding position, it was about holding nerve. In front of a home crowd, against one of the best drivers in the world, in a car that had no business being there, and still, no mistake. Final laps, Alonso pushing, the gap hovering. One moment, that's all it would take, but it never came, against everything that had defined his career. Pastor Maldonado crossed the line in first place. A Formula One winner. For one race, the chaos disappeared. And it looked like, just maybe, everything had changed. It hadn't. That should have been the turning point. The moment everything clicked. The start of a new version of Pastor Maldonado. It wasn't. Almost immediately. Things went back to normal. The mistakes returned. The crashes. The penalties. The moments that made you stop and think, how is this still happening? In Monaco, the walls were never far away. In Canada, contact with other drivers became almost routine. In Spa, he didn't just have incidents. He repeated them. Same corner, same outcome. And across the season, penalties started stacking up faster than results. Drive-throughs, grid drops, time penalties for ignoring flags, misjudging moves, or creating collisions that didn't need to happen. This wasn't bad luck anymore. It was a pattern, and the numbers made that impossible to ignore. By the end of 2012, points in just a handful of races, crashes or incidents in over half the season, double-digit penalties, all in a year where he also, somehow, won a race. And it didn't stop there. 2013 brought more of the same. A slower car, sure, but the same decisions. More spins, more contact. Moments where it looked less like bad timing and more like inevitability. Then came his move to Lotus. A fresh start, a new environment. Another chance to reset everything. It didn't change a thing. Bahrain, launching another car into the air. China, losing control while adjusting his steering wheel. Race after race, the same story kept repeating. It didn't matter the track. It didn't matter the conditions. If there was a way to turn a normal race into chaos, Maldonado would find it. And by the time his Formula One career finally came to an end, the numbers didn't just tell the story, they defined it. 96 races, 1 win, 76 points, and a staggering number of incidents that overshadowed all of it. More incidents than points. Let that sink in, because in Formula One, drivers are remembered for what they achieve. Championships, wins, defining moments. Pastor Maldonado was remembered for everything else. In a sport built on precision, control, and pushing the limits without crossing them, Pastor Maldonado built a career doing the exact opposite. He wasn't the fastest driver on the grid, he wasn't the most consistent, and he definitely wasn't the safest, but he was unforgettable, because every time he went out on track, something could happen, and more often than not, it did. One race, he could beat the best in the world. The next, he'd remind everyone exactly why nobody trusted him to begin with, and maybe that's what makes his story so strange. Because buried underneath all the chaos, there was a fast driver in there, just not one that ever stayed in control long enough to prove it consistently. 96 races, 1 win, a career that made headlines for all the wrong reasons, and a reputation that still follows him today as one of the most dangerous drivers Formula One has ever seen. But somehow, he might not even be the worst. If you enjoyed this video, check out this next one that is more than speed.